Hello and welcome to Ikike Digest, your learning space on Home FTV. I am Kome Odomo. On Ikike Digest, we aim to continuously bring to light environmental issues as it affects communities in our food system. We highlight policy gaps that do not meet the needs of people and provide our listeners with accurate environmental information. In today's edition, we will be looking at the impact of environmental degradation on the Niger Delta children and youths in particular. To better talk about this is Betty Abah, who is a seasoned journalist and an environmentalist. Betty Abah is a Nigerian journalist, author, and advocate for women and children's rights. She founded the Center for Children's Health, Education, Orientation, and Protection, a non-profit group empowering marginalized community. You're welcome, Betty.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
So to get into this conversation, we would like to know, how does it feel marrying journalism and environmental work, and also with the work you do for women and children?
All right. Thank you very much. Right now, I'm more of an activist, an advocate, and my background as a writer, as a journalist, has helped in projecting the work that we do. When you are passionate about an issue, a campaign, and then you have the other skill of being a writer, a public speaker, I think it makes the job easier. It makes the message to reach wider audiences, and it contributes enormously to the success of projects. So I'm happy to have had the background in journalism and then getting into advocacy. I was a journalist, and then I felt, okay, it's good to write and create awareness, but I really want to be on the front line. I really want to be in the trenches, to speak and then get closer to the people that we pose with the responsibility of changing things and not just writing. I really want to be right there in the trenches, on the front line, in protest march, and really screaming, because the issues in Nigeria, some of them will really make you mad, and I felt, okay, I really need to be there on the front line. So I'm really happy to be doing this, and also I've built a very good network of journalist friends, media houses, so they really help to amplify the work that we do, and I'm really happy about it.
Were you advocating for women and children? What prompted that push?
Yes, I've always been as a teenager. I was more of a Sunday school coordinator for children from the age of 14. I had a children's club in my neighborhood, so I've always maybe it's an inborn thing. I've always been in love with children. I've always liked the idea of mobilizing children, and then growing up, I discovered this is not just a passion. Maybe this is more of a calling, because young people are very impressionable. The environment that young people grow in affects them a lot. Most of us are actually products of our environment, and if you come from an environment that has a hugely negative impact on you, it takes a lot of work, a lot of counter exposure to be able to change the negative impact for good. So as much as possible, it's good to mobilize children, especially those in at-risk environments, vulnerable children, for them to have positive impacts, and then to also, on the other hand, also amplify the issues they face, so that they can have interventions and all of that. So, and then you cannot talk about a society, a country, a nation being futuristic when you are not really closely watching, mobilizing, engaging with the children, because these are the future leaders, these are the future country, the future nation. So I really like the idea of working for children. And also, in our country and much of Africa, women are as much vulnerable as children. In fact, they are in the same category. That's why you always have women and children, because they are powerless. They are not really reckoned with. They are not the people that control the power levers are mostly men. This is a male-centric country, continent, and world in general. So when you talk about women, you also talk about children, because they are equally affected by almost the same issues, almost the same socio-cultural, socio-political, socio-economic issues.
So we are aware that environmental pollution has impacts on youths and children. For a child growing up in a degraded environment, What are some of the implications for this child, for this youth? What are the long-term implications and challenges that these children face?
Yes, interestingly, I also work as an environmental activist before now. So I've had some exposure with the real issues on ground in areas like the Niger Delta region, which is meant to be one of the biggest resource-rich regions of the world, but is also ironically one of the poorest and one of the most degraded environmentally and in other areas. And so, but when you talk about, when you juxtapose the impact of the environment, the environmental degradation of the Niger Delta on adults and that of the children, children even suffer the more. They are like the multi-leveled impact, and they are more vulnerable, they are more endangered because, of course, they have more fragile bodies. And then children are also dependent on adults. So if the adults are vulnerable, are impacted, and have multi-level degradation, physically, financially, health-wise, if the adults are vulnerable, are impacted, and their lives are degraded, so you can just imagine the state of the children. So children suffer double jeopardies. Children in the Niger Delta, physically, many of them get sick because they have contact with the pollutions and then the products even from polluted farms and all of that. And of course, much of the water in the Niger Delta is degraded. I know children, just like adults, need water, and some of them actually play inside water in the stream, the water bodies around. So they have direct contact with the pollution, which is a major threat to their health. And some of them are actually victims of that already, as we've seen over the years, with cases of childhood cancer and all of that, just like we have with adults. And then in terms of education, because the entire environment is not just degraded, it's most of the time neglected. So you have low quality of education. We did some work in the Niger Delta, and of course when I work with the Environmental Rights Action Friends of the Earth Nigeria, we go around communities, and some schools have not opened their doors for 6 months because the teachers have not been paid. And then the national curriculum will not wait for those children. And then besides health, besides lack of access to quality education, you have issue of the conflict in the Niger Delta over resource control, over the marginalization of the region. So you have children being militarized, you have children facing the consequences of the various displacements when they are a community is being attacked by military men, a community has there's a communal clash, they're displaced. And then children, you have a whole generation of young people growing up in a militarized zone. They just can't be normal psychologically. They can't just be normal. I remember listening to some Niger Delta female activists when talk about a situation where a community in Delta State had been evacuated to an IDP camp because there was a military attack on the community or so. And then the children in the IDP camp, some activists came in to teach them, just to keep them busy and to ensure that they remain active educationally and all of that. And they discovered that many of the children in the camp, when they write, the strokes of the biro and it is harder on the paper, but just with a certain force. You know, that kind of like a militarized cycle.
Yeah.
And that's what they see. There's a lot of violence,
of tension,
not just environmental violence, the physical violence, the conflict. So it has overwhelmed their psyche, and unconsciously they are militarized themselves. So and it's not really a good thing, because when you talk about the laws of Nigeria, the Child Rights Act, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children, there are explicit recommendations that whatever happens, the sanctity, the sanity, the safety, the protection of children should be top priority. That children should be preserved against all of this violence, all of this instability, all of these issues, all of the conflicts. Their well-being should be preserved. Their well-being should be prioritized. But you say that children are left to their own devices. and they suffer alongside the adults. So I think they suffer a higher level of degradation, and it's something that should really get us worried. It should unsettle every one of us. What will be the future of these children if they are so militarized, if their lives are degraded? It may not even be manifest. You may not see the manifestation outrightly, but growing up, how would the children be integrated to the rest of the Nigerian society, to the rest of the world, when they are coming from like more of a war zone, a psychological war zone, and then they are deprived educationally, materially, and all of that? So I think it's something that we should all be worried about, and there should be special commission, special agencies for Niger Delta children, as far as I'm concerned.
You've been listening to Betty Abah tell us how children are coping in the Niger Delta region, especially with environmental pollution. But we will go on a short break, and when we return, we'll find out from her what strategies can be implemented to help the children in the Niger Delta region. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for a conducive and serene environment to carry out your research works and need the right content to be at your best? Are you a lover of academics and intellectual books? Do you seek proper works of research for knowledge enhancement? Or you want a place to read at your leisure? The Home F Library and Resource Center is the right place to be. With our well-arranged and fully stocked bookshelves, searching for your preferred genres and authors is made much easier than you could ever imagine. With our well-experienced librarians and guides, you've got a reading and research pleasure to catch up with. At Home F Library and Resource Center, Benin City, Nigeria, it is simply an unforgettable experience.
How can your experience from Nigeria lead a sustainable policy recommendation, if I should put it that way, that would help on a global scale?
Well, I think one of the challenges we face with policies is that we have some policies already in existence, but they're not implemented and they're not followed through. So we need stronger demands for accountability. When governments, when our own leaders that we put in positions of power to represent us, and then they are like co-opted or persuaded by corporations not to do that, and we know the ways that they are persuaded not to do that. We need to hold them accountable. And so we need stronger accountability measures. We don't often lack policies. What we lack is accountability and follow through. And I feel like that is what we need to focus some of our attention on.
Welcome back. You've been listening to Betty Abah, a seasoned journalist, an environmentalist, and a woman and children's rights advocate who has been speaking passionately about the rights of children and how it can be protected. Before we went on the break, you were sharing with us some of the challenges that these children have. I would like to know what strategies can be put in place to raise awareness on these dangers that children are faced in environmental areas, and how can environmental education be conserved?
I will admit that there hasn't been enough sensitization or consciousness, creating of consciousness about the impacts of the environment, the overall impacts. I mean, the impact on the overall growth and lives of the children. And I believe that we can do more. I think journalists should be able to focus more on the impacts of the children, and even the activists, organizations working, grassroots organizations working in these communities should be able to project the plight of children and young people in the region. I know of recent times we've been talking about the need for inclusion. When you go to a community and then you engage everyone at the same level, of course, people have multi-leveled impact, and the impact of environment is disproportionate for different people, the men, the women, and the children. So I believe that there's need to talk a lot about the children. Of course, there's been a lot of advocacy, a lot of activities around Niger Delta women. I think we should be able to do more for Niger Delta children and young people, especially because I believe they even suffer more because they're actually dependent on the adults, and the adults are at risk themselves. So I think the grassroots organization should be able to create more awareness, to project more and more on the impact of the children. Because when we are all gone, the women, the adults, it's the children that will be left. I mean, then they'll become the adults. So how have we prepared them when they are already very much impacted? So there is need to project. I believe that advocates, grassroots organizations working in the community should do more. Media houses should spotlight this much more than what we have now. A few years ago, we did a documentary on the impact of the pollution, the environmental pollution on Niger Delta children. We tagged it Futures Aflame, and we focused on the impact of gas flaring, the impact of the pollution, the oil spills, and then of course the overall impact on socio-economic lives. The fact that schools are not doing well, some are not functional. The educational system in much of the Niger Delta region is not really functional, especially primary and secondary. They're not really functional. And then of course the economy, like much of Nigeria, just that the Niger Delta is even worse because you have farming locations that are no longer functional because they've been polluted and all of that. So people just try to struggle. So I think we should spotlight this a lot more. We're able to do the documentary. It's a short documentary. And we actually interviewed children that have not been in school, children whose parents were ill, they had no one to care for, schools that were in dilapidated conditions, and yet there are agencies, yet there are governments. So I think besides spotlighting this, we should also be able to hold the agencies and the government in the various regions accountable. There are people responsible that are entrusted with the responsibility of ensuring relief for the people, of ensuring a functional system. So what are the agencies doing? What are the government at the various levels doing? And of course, like we've heard over and over, there's a major issue with corruption in the Niger Delta with regards to how the agencies carry out the functions, the governments, the different departments of government, the different state governments and all of that. So I think we should be able to call more for accountability from the various agencies and institutions across the Niger Delta that are vested with the responsibility to ensure, a meaningful life for the children, to ensure that the children have futures to look up to. We should be able to spotlight more and then particularly call for accountability.
Yeah, so because you have dragged us into the core issue of the problem, which is degradation. And then we do know that these agencies are not accountable or not as accountable as we expect them to be. How much can community do to mitigate the impact of environmental degradation?
I think the impacts, we should also go back to the issue of accountability. The community should be united. You have occasions where communities are not united. They are siding various agencies, they are siding various officials, and that's not the best. I spoke with an activist in one of the communities in the Niger Delta. I'm not going to name name, and there was an OSP, so he went to the community to see if he could rally around the community members for them to call for action, response from the relevant agencies, and then they wouldn't cooperate with him. He went there several times and they wouldn't cooperate with him because some community members wanted to use it as an opportunity to enrich themselves and all of that. We should not be. And so these are the realities on ground in some of the communities that we really have to speak about. There should be, for the communities to call for accountability, they themselves have to be accountable. They themselves have to be purposeful in calling for accountability, and they should not have ulterior motives. If your community is polluted, it's not going to end well if you just sit on it or you use it as a money spinning opportunity. You have to be pointed, you have to be focused on getting results. So I think the community have to be united to call for accountability. They have to be vigilant against all forms of compromise. And then they have to be ready to amplify their own voices, because like we always say, he who wears the shoes knows where it pinches. So they have to really speak out. There is no reason why they should keep quiet. They have to speak out about the issues, call for help. You see what's happening in Benue State and other parts of the country with the herdsmen attack. Some Benue State wasn't initially vocal. The government wasn't vocal because of party bias and all of that, and allegiance, and that was at the expense of your own people. So we had to speak and speak, and we're screaming and screaming. At the end of the day, they had no other option. It took someone like Very Dark Man to go to Benue. It took someone like the Pope to speak out before they woke up and then started visiting, presidential visits and all that. And that shouldn't be ideally, because we're talking about human lives. So there should be a dedication to the sanctity of human lives. And we don't have double lives, don't have double opportunities. You just live once. And so there's a need for transparency, even within the communities themselves. And a need for focus, a need for them to call for accountability, for call for response, timely response. Because they're the ones who live within the communities. There's no money they will get that will equal their health. So that is very, very important.
It's true, very important. And then we do know that you work closely with children and women, and then there are some government policies that aid the work that you do, that is helping you hold the government accountable. But what role do this policy play in environmental protection, in safeguarding health and the future of the Niger Delta children?
Okay, so first of all, it's a multidimensional question. There are so many agencies, for instance, in the that vested with responsibility of safeguarding the Niger Delta, of ensuring infrastructural growth, all kinds of. There's NOSRA, there's NDDC, there's which other one?
The high prep is there for the cleanup of the
high prep. So many of them, and even the states have their own various individual agencies. But yet, as with so many things in our dear land, many of these agencies have been riddled with corruption. And so there are all kinds of laws guiding the operation, for instance, of multinationals in those communities, laws, policies that spells out what the community should gain from government. 13% derivation, all kinds of policies for the comfort and safety of the Niger Delta environment, for the Niger Delta region to thrive like any oil producing region in the world. You see what's happening in most of the Middle East. See the space of development. Like, I mean, it's one of the most developed regions of the world now, the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and even Qatar and the rest of them. It is from the same oil, and yet why is Nigeria's case different? It's because of the lack of accountability, because of corruption with the agencies in particular, not just the agency, the government, and then the multinationals taking advantage of the laxity and the compromised state of the government and the various agencies. So we have no other option than to ensure that the Niger Delta works, the Niger Delta thrives, and that's by holding the people in government, the people entrusted with responsibility of overseeing the prosperity of the Niger Delta, that we hold them accountable. And the major issue remains corruption. So we will ensure that corruption is tackled. Because if corruption is not tackled, we'll continue to talk, and it becomes like a circuit. We just keep talking and talking. And so something really has to give. So both the Niger Delta environment, the Niger Delta community members, environmentalists, and every stakeholder has to continue to elevate the level of screaming, elevate the level of lamentation, elevate the level of demand for accountability, so that things can work well, but especially because it's not just the Niger Delta environment is currently degraded and people are in a quagmire and all of that. The fact that the future of the Niger Delta is shaky when the children, the young people who are the future, are not well taken care of. are not preserved enough, are not empowered enough, are not protected enough for them to emerge into that glorious future which they deserve. So I think we really need to be united, be deliberate about ensuring that the Niger Delta actually thrives.
So this is the very last question from me. You mentioned about a documentary that Sea Hope produced, and we've been following consistently what you do with children and women. Can you share some of the success story as a way to encourage other women to speak up and fight for their rights?
All right, thank you very much. Sea Hope started by working with children in informal communities, informal settlements across Lagos. Of course, Lagos is caught in the grip of an urbanization that does not accommodate the poor, especially the urban poor. And it's very, very ironic because government ideally is set up to care for the most vulnerable in the society. The government ideally is set up to care for the most vulnerable, the most at risk. But the Lagos State government consistently over the years appears to be at war with the urban poor. And then equally triggering, equally alarming is the impact on young people. Government agencies can just wake up overnight and go to a community and burn it down. And we say, okay, this community has been demolished. And people just move on to the next story.
Like nothing happened.
What about the families? What about the children? So what happens to them?
Yes.
They're not rich. They don't have social media presence. They cannot speak good English. They may not even smell fine. Mostly fishing communities and what we call slums. Struggling people. So what happens to them? Do they have any right to housing? Do they have any right to informed consent? Do they have any right to adequate notice for those houses to be removed? Should those houses be removed in the first place? Does government have the responsibility to provide affordable housing for its populace, its teeming populace? And if government thinks these people should not be part of the city, why does government goes to the same communities every 4 years to get their votes? So these are some of the things that really, like I say, are very triggering for me, for someone who also comes from a poor community and has been helped by God and has been helped by the transformative power of education. And I believe that these children could become something in the future. So why are you endangering them? Why are you jeopardizing that same future? Because they're not going to get anywhere. They are Nigerian children as long as they are born here, whether you think their children, their parents come from anywhere. And in any case, they are actually indigenous Nigerian children a lot of the time. So, of course, I'm coming from a journalism background and I have a fairly strong social media presence. And so I talk about the issues all of the time. And with time, we started Sea Hope. And then we've seen a lot of change. We've also discovered that silence is extremely dangerous. When something is going on, you ask questions and you speak about it. And in most of the cases, I can tell you that majority of the forced eviction exercises in Lagos are illegal. There's a place we call Monkey Village. They went there one morning and demolished the place. And then it was discovered that the people actually came to demolish a parcel of land close to that community, which was being contested in court. And they went there illegally to demolish that place. And they saw Monkey Village. They said, oh, so people live here. Oh yeah, bulldozer, go and remove it too. Just like that. So, and people had traveled and all of that. And so many of them came back and their houses were burnt down. So these are things we see in Lagos all of the time. But not so many people are talking about it as if these people don't matter. As if, oh, what's the end? They should go back to their village. So we talk about it, and by talking about it, we've seen a lot of restraint. We've seen that when we put it out in the public burners, there is no justification.
Thank you very much, Betty, for all you do for the children and the women and for the society at large. We do appreciate your time on our set today, and we hope that you will continue to do the work that you do. Thank you very much. And we've come to the end of today's episode. We do hope that you found it very interesting. Remember to visit our website, www.homef.org, and follow us on our social media. I remain your host, Kome Ojamo. Thank you.